Do you have a bestie that's a little bit toxic? Story time. Disclaimer, this is my story. When I was 20, I moved to LA. I was so broke, I had 4 jobs at the same time. I worked at a hookah lounge where I cleaned the toilets and served. I also worked at a Mexican restaurant, I walked dogs, and I was a personal assistant. The Mexican restaurant I worked at was on Sunset Boulevard. And boy oh boy did I meet a lot of celebrities. On one occasion, I met a girl who was in a couple of movies. Is she in movies now? No, she's not. So I would say she's like an F-list celebrity. She was the type of girl that got everyone's attention, wanted to be the life of the party. And as soon as I walked up to her table, this girl wanted to adopt me. She kept saying things like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. Right away, she was acting like my best friend. It was as if the it girl, the popular girl at high school, wanted to befriend me. I fell for it hard and fast. She had a lot of money, and because I was so broke, she would pick me up and take me places with her. She took me to a couple of industry parties. This is where her envy was showing. She introduced me to a couple of people. And by a couple of people, I mean huge celebrities. But you know how she introduced me? You guys, meet my little friend. Her name's Esther, and she's a struggling actress. She works at a Mexican restaurant. I wanted to crawl in a hole and never come out. Part 2 is up. You know that toxic bestie that we've all had? Story time. Disclaimer, this is my story. After she embarrassed me on purpose by introducing me as her little friend who works at a Mexican restaurant, I wanted to crawl in a hole and die. I was standing in front of a bunch of celebrities while this F-list celeb made me feel so small. But she was also the kind of girl that would recover really quickly. She would start complimenting me on how beautiful I was. So I would feel better about her having just embarrassed me. I would somehow just justify it in my mind. She was also the type of girl that would start telling me all of her secrets. And this is when I made a big mistake. I started trusting her with my own secrets. This is what those toxic besties want. They want you to trust them so quickly and for you to fall right into their trap. Well, I did. I talked to her about my relationship with the fiance that I had at the time, and I even confided in her about the essay that I had experienced. And before I knew it, she started copying my style. My first language is Spanish, and sometimes I answer in Spanish. If you ask me, do you want a bottle of water? Sometimes I'll say sí or no. So she started saying sí or no. And I laughed when this happened. I quickly realized that I was influencing her more than she was influencing me. On one occasion, she invited me out with her friends. Suddenly, I became the topic of conversation. All of her girlfriends started asking me about my SA and what that was like. And they started bringing up all the issues I had with my fiance. I realized that everything I had told her, she repeated back to them. I felt like an animal in a zoo. They stared at me, asked me questions, and waited for me to answer. They lived for the drama. My drama, to be exact. After that, I realized she wasn't a friend. She was a frenemy, a gossiping, drama-addicted frenemy, waiting for me to fail so that she can feed off of me. You know you have or have had that bestie. And if you still do, I think you know what you need to do. Self-care sister out. Story time about how my modeling agency fat shamed me. Today's society has all these beauty standards for us women, and trust me, it gets to me. Back in 2015, I got with a new modeling agency. I actually submitted online, which means they didn't actually see me before they accepted me, so they made an appointment for me to come in and meet my agent. Well, as soon as my agent saw me, she was speechless. She asked me how tall I was and I said 5'2", which they already knew. Then she said, oh, okay. She looks me up and down and says, well, I guess we could use you for shoe modeling. Shoe modeling? Excuse me? She wanted me to notice that her reaction to me was visceral. As the meeting goes on, she asked me what experience I have, and I told her, which I did have quite a lot of experience. I explained to her that I would love to do makeup ads, hair ads, so basically just model with the top half of my body, which to this she said, yeah, you can do that. But then again, she says, I think we'll be able to use you more for shoes. I always want models with small feet. I was literally holding back tears as I was sitting in that chair. Then she says to me, you know what? Maybe if you gain some weight, you could try to be a curvy model. You know, maybe gain 20 pounds. It's probably the only way you'll end up modeling. And when she said this, a tear fell down my face. I couldn't believe that My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimers are not my story time. It's not me on Instagram. A few days ago, I got on my husband's phone to transfer some money from his account to mine. When I started looking for his banking app, I noticed something else on his screen. I had never seen this before, so I clicked on it. And as soon as I opened it, I see my sister's pictures. And I knew it was her OnlyFriends right away. By the way, I had never told my husband that my sister had an OnlyFriends. She wouldn't even post about it on her social media. So the fact that he found it makes me believe that he had my phone bugged or something. But here's the thing. He was using a different name for his account. So it was likely that my sister did not know it was him. From there, I could see that he was following a bunch of other girls. And when I went to their messages, he had paid over hundreds of dollars every single day to all of these girls. Can you imagine how much money that is? My husband came into the room and saw me on his phone. Of course, he didn't freak out because he never thought that I would find it. But I confronted him right away. But he didn't even flinch. He said he had every right to go on OnlyFans because it was the same thing as going to any website. I told him to at least unfollow my sister and he said that he wouldn't. He said he loved it because it was like watching me do naughty things. Then he said, isn't this better than cheating on you? I was flabbergasted. Part 3 is up. My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimers is not my story time. It's not me on Instagram. That's when he told me that it was better than him cheating on me. And I was shocked. I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I threatened him. I told him that if he didn't stop following my sister, that I would start my own OnlyFriends account. Like I said, he's really jealous. So he went berserk. He ripped my phone out of my hand and threw it against the wall. Then he told me that the only reason he asked me to quit my job was so that I wouldn't be around other men. By the way, I used to be a personal trainer, and most of the time I would only train women. I told him that my sister and I wouldn't be comfortable with him looking at our OnlyFriends. It was so disturbing. Oh, and I also told him that he needed to stop controlling me, and that I could buy my own phone with my own money and start my own account. Then he came to his senses and started to apologize. And I also told him that I was suspecting that he bugged my phone, and that he was receiving my messages, because there was no other way he could have found out about my sister's account. Then he calmed down and explained things to me. He said that he had bugged my phone a few months ago because I was posting too much on Instagram and it was bothering him. So basically, he has access to my DMs and all my text messages. Promised to stop doing that and that he would buy me a new phone. And that's how he found out about my sister's OnlyFriends. He said he only signed up out of curiosity, and that he only wanted to see a few pictures and then delete it. But the more he kept looking at her pictures, the more he would think of me, and that it turned him on. And in front of me, he deactivated his account and deleted everything. He promised me that he would never do that again. Of course, I haven't forgiven him though. Haven't even spoken to him in days. But every time he sees me, he tries to kiss me and hug me. And when I push him away, he tries even harder. Honestly, I think he likes it. I do believe that he's secretly addicted to drama and that he thrives on it. I'm planning on never telling my sister about it. I don't think she'd feel comfortable around him ever again. I mean, I don't feel comfortable around him right now. I'm so confused and I don't know if I should leave him or not. He's so controlling all the time. What should I do? Story time about how I got my manager fired because I didn't like him. Yeah, this might make me a terrible person, but a girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Was sending me on Instagram. I started working as a wedding planner in a company about 6 months ago. And yes, I've always been very ambitious, but I definitely took it too far this time. In the company, there were other wedding planners as well, and we were all managed by the same person. Let's call him Tom. Tom was an okay manager, but here's the thing. When I met him, I hated him right away. He was lazy and incompetent, and I knew that I could do his job 10 times better. Then I hated him even more when I found out how much money he earned. He was making over $200,000 a year. After a week of working there, I realized what he was doing. He would tell all of the wedding planners to do things throughout the day that added up to being his actual job. But none of us realized it because he was telling all of us individually without the others knowing. But I'm really observant and I realized it right away. I started watching him all the time. He would come into the office really late, would make himself coffee, and practically eat an entire box of cereal at his desk. Once he was finished with that, he would email us our task for the day, which was the stuff that he needed to do. Then he would play video games for 5 hours. Part two of how I got my manager fired because I didn't like him. Does this make me evil? Yes. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me an Instagram. When I realized he was palming off all his work on the other people, I decided to start documenting all of his laziness. So like I said in part 1, he would spend his morning eating an entire box of cereal. Then he would send emails out telling us what to do for the day, which was everything he had to do for the day. Then for about 5 hours, he would play video games on his laptop. And how did I know this? Every 15 minutes or so, he would go get a snack. So I would run into his office and take a picture of his laptop. He didn't even bother to fake it. You might wonder why no one else noticed. My desk was the closest one to his office. Also, our boss worked remotely and would only come into the office about once a week. And when she would come into the office, he would act completely different. So after documenting all of his activities for about a month, I decided to go to the boss and show her everything. I kept every single text message he ever sent me of him asking me to do something for him. I had all the emails he'd ever sent us. I had videos of him eating a full box of cereal at his desk for about 2 hours. And I had all the pictures I took of his laptop while he was playing video games. And all of it was time-stamped. I asked my boss if we could jump on a call and she said yes. By the way, my boss is amazing. She's a total boss lady and doesn't take crap from anyone, so I knew that she would fire him right away. When we got on the phone, I asked her to check her email and she looked at all the evidence. Then she told me, wow, I'm actually not surprised. I told her that if she gave me the job, I would be extremely productive and get us more clients. She thanked me and called the manager right away. And guess what? The following day, he was not there. My boss called me and thanked me for being honest with her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I got my manager fired because I didn't like him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me an Instagram. When I finally got my manager fired the next day, my boss called me and thanked me for giving her all the evidence. But I didn't stop there. I asked her if she could consider me for his job and she told me that she would think about it. So I took it a step further. Emailed her the list of new clients that I had brought in and it did the trick. She emailed me back saying that she would give me a chance. That meant that I was now going to get $200,000 a year and that I didn't have to deal with bridezillas anymore. Since I became manager, I've doubled our client list and increased revenue by 12%. I also convinced my boss to give everyone a bonus. I even redecorated the entire office, making it more functional, and everybody loves the new space. I also got myself a fancy 2-bedroom apartment, which has a pool and a sauna, a doorman, and I get massages every single week. And I got myself a very new nice car. I'm currently planning a girls trip for me and my friends to go to Greece. I would have never been able to do all of this had I not gotten that job. So if you're wondering if I feel guilty about getting my manager fired, no, I don't. There's nothing more disgusting than a lazy man. I did check his Instagram after sending this story time. He's gained about 40 pounds and plays video games for a living. Not sure how that works, but good for me. Bye. Storytime about how I caught my dad doing the dirty with my neighbor. My lying, cheating father helped me move into my new apartment. I have to be honest and say my dad is narcissistic. He's always been selfish, thinks he's always right. There's just no way to reason with him when he's wrong. My sister and I are very tight with my mom. We will always side with her. By the way, my parents are still married. They've been together for 37 years. My sister's 30 and I'm 22. I recently landed my dream job, and this meant that I needed to find an apartment closer to my job. So I moved about half an hour away from my parents. My dad travels for work a lot, which is the best. It means he's not home a lot. So I told my mom that she should move into my apartment with me. She said that she would think about it. My move-in day finally arrived. My mom and my sister had to help me pack and organize everything. My dad didn't lift a finger, so I asked him to help me move all the boxes into my apartment. He said yes. The moment we get into my apartment, he sees a really pretty girl, and he just starts talking to her like I'm not even there. For some reason, this girl starts flirting back. I was appalled and disgusted. She then asked my dad for his phone number. What the heck? Part 2 is story time about I caught my dad doing it with my neighbor. That's when my neighbor asked my dad for his number. I turned to her and I said, he's married to my mother, you know. And then I pushed my dad into the elevator. I instantly started to cry. I was embarrassed and mortified. How can I have a father like that? I told him he was never to come to my building again, and that he flirted with her first. He was twice her age. Disgusting. He told me that I was overreacting and that the only person that made it weird and gross was me. Luckily, it did not take us long to move in all my boxes, but then he kept looking for excuses to stay. I asked him to leave 3 times, and all of a sudden, the girl walks out of the apartment that was right in front of me, meaning she's my neighbor. My dad started talking to her again. That's when I closed my apartment door and locked him out. Could hear them talking for a few minutes, so I put on my music and started unpacking. And then I called my mom immediately to tell her, and I begged her to come live with me. Then she told me that she got into a really big fight with my dad about it. I was so angry I opened my door and just left. I see my dad and her still talking in the hallway. I didn't say anything and I left. Went to pick up my mom and I took her out for lunch. My mom and I decided to go back to my apartment to unpack. I walked up to my apartment first, and as soon as I opened the door, that's when I see my dad's naked butt on top of my neighbor. Part 3 is up. Story time about I caught my dad doing the dirty with my neighbor. As soon as I see my dad's naked butt on top of my neighbor, I just started yelling. I needed them to know that I was in the room. How dare my dad do this in my apartment? I mean, couldn't he go to her apartment? 20 steps behind me was my mom, and as soon as I yell, she runs in. Mind you, my dad is still on top of this girl. When he sees my mom, he jumps up. The girl is completely naked, grabs her clothes, and runs over to her apartment. My dad didn't even bother to cover his dingling. It was the most horrendous thing that had ever happened to me. That's when my mom says, I want a divorce and I'm moving in with her. He didn't say a word. He calmly put his clothes back on and walked out. Didn't give an explanation, didn't apologize, nothing. A true narcissist. When he finally leaves, my mom and I start to cry. We called my sister and she came over. We went back to my parents' house and grabbed all of my mom's stuff. We didn't even have time for boxes, we just grabbed trash bags. My mom and I are living together, but guess what? My dad is now dating my neighbor. He's never apologized to my mom. They did get a divorce, thank God. We have to see him all the time at her apartment. How do I break them up? Update on how my boyfriend is threatening to expose our SEX tape if I don't get back with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Like I said in part 3, he's on his best behavior, and it's been 2 weeks now. I'm constantly being told by him that he's never going to release the tape as long as I stay with him. Now he's acting like the best boyfriend ever. He's treating my parents with respect. He's even given me money to give my parents. You guys won't believe what he did. The day I took him back after he threatened me, asked for permission to come to my house and have dinner with my parents. Like I said before, he wasn't asking for permission to show up at my house. That's when he tells my parents that he wants to take care of us, meaning he wants to give us an allowance. Immediately, my parents were happy. I thought they were going to say no, and my dad was like, absolutely. We love you, we accept you. And now my parents are pressuring me to stay with him because he's giving them money. He's giving my dad $2,500 a month, which is enough to cover the mortgage payment. My parents don't know about the SEX tape, and I don't know if I should tell them. Part 5 is my boyfriend is threatening to expose our SEX tape if I don't stay with him. This is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Now that he's giving my parents money, of course my parents want me to stay with him. This just goes from bad to worse. I actually started falling in love with him again because he's been behaving so good. We've been doing it like crazy, and he's always with me. Even if I'm working in my apartment, he'll just come over and make me dinner, or he'll do my laundry, something he never used to do. 2 nights ago, I asked him why he was still threatening me with the SEX tape. That's when he told me that he had a fear of losing me. I explained to him that he'll never lose me because we have a great relationship. That's when he looks at me and says, as soon as I delete that video, you'll leave me. And he grabbed me by the neck. Part 6 is my boyfriend is threatening to expose our SEX tape if I don't stay with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. When he grabbed me by the neck and told me that I belonged to him and that nobody else could ever touch me ever again. I told him that I didn't want anyone else. Once he fell asleep, I took your guys' advice. I looked for the tape and I finally found it. He put it in a safe and he forgot that he told me the code. I immediately left his apartment and went straight home. I went to the cops the next morning and they told me that the only way that I could prove that he was threatening me me was if I had a text message or a recording, that they can't just go arrest him because he told me. Here's where you guys are gonna get mad at me. I didn't break up with him. I told him that I would keep the tape. And surprisingly, he accepted. But he doesn't know that I went to the police. My parents still don't know. He's still extremely possessive and jealous and is constantly all over me. But I guess I kind of like that as long as he doesn't go back to being crazy. Now I'm just afraid that he'll try to record us again. Or that he has a copy. Oh my god, do you guys think he has a copy? He also bought me a new car 2 days ago. What should I do? Story time about how my date broke into my house and tried to choke me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. 2 years ago, I signed up to Hinge. I matched with a really cute guy. Lived in my city, drove an expensive car, and was looking for fun. At the time, I was not looking for a relationship. I just wanted to have some fun. It was lust at first sight. We were both attracted to each other and he couldn't keep his hands off me. Now, I did like this, but he was taking it a little bit far. We were sitting at a booth and had some drinks. This is when he kissed me. He did not ask me for permission and he put his hand on my thigh. I let him do it because I knew I was having fun. But then he started inviting himself over to my apartment. I told him that I was definitely not comfortable with him coming over. He made a joke about following me home and coming in and doing whatever he wanted to me. I laughed it off but was creeped out. I told him I got gassy and that I needed to go home. What was about to happen was terrifying. Part 2 is story time about how my date broke into my house and tried to choke me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. I lied and told him that I was getting gassy and I needed to go home. We say goodbye in the restaurant and he walks me to my car. I drive off and I check if he's following me. No, he wasn't. As soon as I get home, I decide to order pizza because I was still hungry. I mean, I actually was not gassy. While I'm waiting for the pizza to arrive, I run a bath and put my music on as loud as possible. By the way, I live alone and my house is pretty big. I decide to take a quick shower to take my makeup off, and 5 minutes into my shower, my phone starts to ring. It's my date. He says, "Are you sure you don't want me to come over? You look lonely." I told him, "How do you know what I look like?" Then he says, "Just send me your address." I did not. I hung up and blocked him right away. I get out of the shower and I hear the doorbell ring. When I open the door, nobody is there. What happens next is terrifying. Part 2 is story time about how my date broke into my house and tried to choke me. I open my front door and nobody is there. Remember, I thought it was the pizza guy. I look closer, and that's when I see a dark figure standing in the corner. Can you imagine how scary that is? My knees instantly started to shake, and that's when I realized it was my date. I told him if he left now, I wouldn't call the cops. Then he runs at me while taking off his belt, puts the belt around my neck and starts squeezing so hard. Almost immediately passed out. I was wearing a bathrobe. He ripped it off of me. Then he said the creepiest thing. "I want to see what you look like passed out." Then the doorbell rings. It's the pizza guy. He finally lets go and tells me that he'll be back. I run outside and the pizza guy stays with me until the cops come. Unfortunately, the police never found him. He obviously lied about his name. I'm afraid he's gonna come back for me. What should I do? Here's a story time, but I needed to sneeze first, so give me a sec. Story time about how I got my boyfriend fired from his job because he had a girl coworker. I'm totally toxic. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. Let me start off by saying, yes, I do love my boyfriend. I'm also extremely toxic. And honestly, he is too. Here's a little backstory. We both met when we were dating other people. In fact, he was dating my best friend, and I was dating his best friend. I'm 18 and he's 19. So yeah, we are a little immature. But hey, love is love. After we met, we started secretly hooking up. And then finally, we broke up with them. Now that we're together, none of our friends speak to each other. They've all sided with the other friend. So he and I have been together for 6 months now. He's extremely controlling. He's always checking my Snapchat, my location, always wants to know where I am. So I started doing the exact same thing to him, mostly out of spite. Then I realized he's a little sketchy. He does not want me to have his location, so I started blocking him on Snapchat and Instagram. This drove him absolutely crazy. So much so that he deactivated his Instagram just so that I would feel more comfortable. At first I was like, OMG, he's so sweet, he loves me. But then I just realized this is another manipulation tactic on his part. I needed a way to manipulate him even more. He started coming to my house unannounced. My parents hated this. They told him that he shouldn't be doing that anymore. He started talking bad about my parents to me. Obviously, this is a big red flag for me. I mean, I can deal with the rest, but talking bad about my parents? Hell no. Well, I was furious with him. He started telling me that my mom was crazy and that she was probably cheating on my dad, and that's where I learned to be a cheater too. Then he started talking bad about my parents to his parents. So his mom called me and asked me if I was okay with my parents. Guess what happens? I show up to his job, and there he is talking to a girl. A pretty girl. Both work at Abercrombie & Fitch. Can you imagine what she looks like? So I had to get him fired. Part 2. Story time about how I got my boyfriend fired from his job because he had a girl coworker. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. Well, I show up to his Abercrombie & Fitch job and I find him talking to a girl. Very pretty girl. I went insane. Pulled him aside and told him that he needed to quit right then and there. That if the tables were turned and I was the one talking to a really cute boy at my job, he would lose it and break up with me immediately. He started telling me that I was overreacting. I was being insecure. Me being insecure? Not him checking my phone every day. By the way, the girl was so nice to me. Came up to me later and said, "You don't need to worry about anything. I have a boyfriend and and I'm not interested in yours. I did appreciate it, but the way my boyfriend was talking to her was a no-no. So here's what I did. Waited for his shift to end, and I went straight into the Abercrombie and asked to speak to the manager. And that's when I made up the whole story. I told him that this boy that was working there was harassing me, and that he kept staring at me and grabbed my arm, which made me feel super uncomfortable and scared. And the cherry on top, I started to cry. And I told him that this wasn't the first time it happened, that the same boy had done it another time. The manager, of course, apologized right away. I left the store. 2 hours later, my boyfriend calls me crying. He said that he got fired and he didn't know why. That all the manager said was that his behavior was inappropriate. And my boyfriend couldn't figure it out. Well, he's never gonna find out that it was me that got him fired. So I begged my dad to hire my boyfriend at his car shop. And my dad did, out of the kindness of his heart. So I made my boyfriend eat all of his dirty words. Not only that, but him working at my dad's car shop allows me to keep an eye on him at all times. You see, I have access to all the cameras. And I also show up whenever I want. But here's the crazier part. Remember the girl that my boyfriend was talking to? She slid into my DMs and told me that I'm pretty. She even asked me to go on a date. I mean, should I? Am I the asshole for punching my sister's boyfriend after I found out he was abusing her? Disclaimer, this is not my story time it was sent to me on Instagram. My poor sister is so dumb. And for that matter, so is the rest of my family. My parents are extremely Christian. My sister and I were raised to never interact with men. And if you were to date a man, it was because you were going to marry him. Do you see where I'm going with this? My sister is 22, by the way. She's never had a boyfriend and she's never even spoken to boys before. And she met her current boyfriend. He love-bombed her in the first week. He was a perfect gentleman in front of my parents. He said he was Christian. He said that he loved animals and that he had a 9-to-5 job. Well, let me tell you, it's all lies. My sister stopped talking to us for some reason. Obviously, this made me extremely suspicious, so I started going over to his place when she did. That's when I found out that he was pretty much home all day. All day. Sitting on his couch watching movies. What do you think my sister was doing? He would do his laundry, clean his kitchen, cook for him, take care of his dogs. The worst part is I found bruises on her neck and her arms. And when I did, she broke down and told me the truth. He got fired from his job and took it out on her. She said he locked her in his closet for 3 hours and hit her. And the worst part is, my parents told me to mind my business. Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for punching my sister's boyfriend after I found out he was abusing her? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. When I told my parents that my sister had bruises on her neck and her arms, they told me to stay out of it. Essentially, I needed to mind my own business. I could not believe the words that were coming out of my father's mouth. When I looked at my mother, she had tears in her eyes. And that's when I asked them both, as your daughters, do you think that we deserve to get abused? And of course, they said no. This is when my sister's boyfriend started insisting that she move in with him. I did my hardest to convince her not to. Short of tying her and keeping her in our house, there was nothing I could do. That's when I see my sister walking out of my house with her bags, only to move in with her abuser. Can you guys put yourself in my shoes? I was trembling with anger. I went to her and I got down on my knees and begged her not to leave, but she still walked out with tears in her eyes. I could tell she didn't want to move out. I didn't see my sister for another 2 weeks. She finally came over, and when she did, I interrogated her and literally recorded it. She told me that he wasn't abusing her as badly. He was only checking her phone and only letting her eat at certain times of the day, but at least he wasn't hitting her. And she told me the worst news of all. Proposed, pressured her into saying yes. My parents were happy. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for punching my sister's boyfriend after I found out he was abusing her? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Not only is my sister now engaged to her abuser, my parents are happy about it. My parents know that they've already done it, so essentially, she has to marry him. At first, I thought the same, but the more I think about it, just because my sister did it with this man, why does she have to marry him? The abuse is abuse. There's no justification for it. I had to do something about it. I was at my wit's end. Picture this happening to your sister. What would you do? Found his mother on Facebook and went to visit her with my mom. I needed my mom to join me on this. The fact that she would just cry about it and not do anything pissed me off more than anything in my life. We showed up under the pretext that we wanted to have lunch with her. And to my surprise, his family is extremely wealthy. They lived in a great neighborhood, and their house was the biggest on the block. And she also had an amazing spread for us, with caviar and champagne. My mom and I were stunned. I mean, her son doesn't look like the type to come from a rich family. He has a shitty apartment and no job. His mom told us all the tea. She hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. He had slapped her before, and they stopped giving him money. So all the times that he said he was employed, it was his parents giving him money. His mom told us that we needed to get my sister away from him. And that's what we did. Part 4 is up. Am I the asshole for punching my sister's boyfriend after I found out he was abusing her? Once I found out from his own mother that he had abused her, my mom and I knew that we needed to get her away from him. We went straight to their apartment. And at first, we could hear him telling my sister not to open the door. After 10 minutes of my mother and I begging, my sister finally opens the door. All I did was grab her and pull her out the door. When her boyfriend came at me, I punched him as hard as I could. And he didn't come after us. A few days later, his own mother sent my sister $20,000 to cover the cost of the lawyers. My sister got a restraining order. My mom kicked my dad out of the house, and the 3 of us live in peace now. I'm taking them to Europe for the summer. Would you have done the same?